Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. It's the Wednesday, July 1st, 2026 episode of The Marco Dure Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive halfway through the year and the start of July, folks. Thank you for being here today, midweek show. Let's get right down to business here today. We've got lots to discuss, as always. And I got to tell you, I'm not the only one that was upset about the Supreme Court ruling yesterday about the Birthright citizenship case. I'm beside myself that we had 5 justices that obviously cannot determine what the 14th Amendment actually says and means, when it's as clear as mud, even to me, who is not a lawyer. So I don't understand this position that we find ourselves in. And I want to review this again for you because, again, we need to understand exactly what the Constitution says at the time it was written. Not what we'd like it to be, but actually what it actually says. So let's jump into it right now. I'm going to read to you from Saving the Constitution. This is a great book. This is by Dr. Richard Proctor. And this clearly illustrates what the text says and what it means in its original form. In other words, an originalist, like a Clarence Thomas, like a Sam Alito. Clearly, the rest of the Supreme Court can't seem to figure this out for some strange reason. Let's break it down. Let's know exactly what it is. So when someone says to you, wow, they ruled in favor of the Constitution, they have no idea what they're talking about. I was arguing with people online about this yesterday that can't seem to figure out basic English language. Here we go. This is the problem. We're in Section 1 right now. This is where the Birthright case comes from. And it says, all persons born are naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, comma, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. It goes on to say, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So there's a couple important parts about this. Obviously, the first sentence is very crucial. There are 2 provisions in this. 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and, that's the key part there, and, so there's 2 parts, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So you have to ask yourself the questions. What jurisdiction are we talking about? Well, of course, it'd be in the United States. Because if it wasn't, it would just simply say all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. You would need to add that other provision in there, if that's exactly what the 5 are telling us. So that key part, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, means your parents are legally citizens of the United States of America. That's what it means. So therefore, how could it mean any single person that has a child here could come into the United States, for instance, if you're here legally, or let's say you're on vacation and you're going to labor early and you have a child. Does that mean that child is a citizen of the United States right now? Is that what the framers of this amendment intended it to be? Of course they did. And by the way, none of the language that was written about the 14th Amendment, Section 1, says anything about this. Nothing even close. Now, people are saying, well, this has to do with slavery, Jerace. Yes, it has to do with slavery, but it's identifying what a citizen is. They are clearly making it known this is what a citizen is, and therefore they are allotted due process, their life, liberty, and property without due process cannot be taken away, and equal protection under the law. This is where everything comes to. So in other words, you can't make a law saying, you know what, everyone under, we'll use a race. We'll use a race of people. Let's say Asian Americans. We'll just throw a race out there. Could be any race. Doesn't matter. And someone in Congress makes a law saying, we're going to take these rights away from Asian Americans. You can't do that because we all have equal protection under the law as U.S. citizens. So that's why this is important as well. There's many things happening. And by the way, I think we should revisit this sometime for, the biased college admissions that we seem to find ourselves in with quota systems in the United States and DEI. I think that the Supreme Court would be very interested to understand and tackle that one next. Don't you think so? I think that'd be great. But this is important that we understand this, folks, because without the actual knowledge, without the understanding of what the terminology means, then we get decisions like we had yesterday. So I don't know how Bonehead Barrett or John Roberts, I understand why the other three lunatic females on the Supreme Court figured this one out for themselves. They voted based on, ruled on party lines. That's all it comes down to. It's partisan. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with the Constitution because that doesn't say that. And it doesn't say that because of what I just read to you. Illegal aliens are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They are of a different jurisdiction, where they came from. And in this amendment, it's very clear that a citizen has allegiance to our nation. So therefore, you cannot be an illegal alien, come in the United States, and have a child that has allegiance to a foreign power. That doesn't make any sense. Who would buy that? By the way, who would pass that in the 1860s? I don't know anybody that would. So I'm very troubled about this, and I'm very worried about what the future of the country comes to as a result of this. Again, it's been misused over and over again by people with simply personal agendas. I think we all would understand that. Again, based on the ridiculous ruling we had yesterday. And John Roberts championing this like he's, done something courageous. Again, it's completely asinine. Again, I don't understand how a man can go to Harvard and not understand what it means when it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You're in the United States and you're subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That means you belong here. You are a citizen of the United States. Doesn't mean you just show up randomly. Doesn't mean you show up when you're 9 months pregnant, have a child and go back to China or go back to India or go back to wherever the hell you came from, and your child's now a U.S. citizen. Again, that's completely ridiculous. And anyone who's telling you otherwise is completely idiotic, in my own estimation. But as I said to you yesterday, again, we had Justices Alito, Justice Thomas were very, very upset about this ruling yesterday because, again, people are not looking at the Constitution for what it meant. They're not looking at it in its original text. That's the problem with this. By the way, whoever taught the other five, jurisprudence, I don't know where you would get your information from for that. Again, if I understand this, and I'm not a lawyer, how could they not understand this? Again, folks, it's as clear as mud, but this is a personal agenda from these people. Absolutely 100%. We know John Roberts doesn't like Trump. It's well known. I don't know what's going on with Conehead Barrett. I can't figure her out. I told you she was going to be a mess from day one. I understand the three liberals on the court, why they're ruling in favor of this, because, again, it changes the demographics of the country, and that's how their party can regain power and stay in control. That's what it's all about. Time and time again, when we look at immigration with the Democrats, it's all about maintaining power. It's all about creating a new group in this country that will continue to vote for them 3 out of 4 times. This is a win for them. A very big win for, again, the Democrats who try to do things like create sanctuary states, for instance. Sanctuary cities. These policies help them out. No voter ID laws. All these things help keep them in power, which means, therefore, you're getting representation in Congress or on the courts or what have you, or the governorship. And they're also creating bad policies. Now, Eric Schmitt, who, like myself, was very upset yesterday, he went on to say, though, in the Tampa Free Press, it says here that he said, if we can't fix it with ordinary legislation, then we must do what the Constitution commands in the moment of a national crisis. We must amend the Constitution and restore American citizenship. Now, Schmitt is very well versed on this. By the way, he's also led an amicus brief in the case and previously convened a congressional hearing on the 14th Amendment, so he understands exactly what I've just told you. and framed citizenship as a bond between a nation and its people. That's exactly correct. We are of this land, therefore we decide what happens on this land. We have a connection to this land. How could you come here when you're 9 months pregnant, have a child, get all these citizenship for that child, leave the country, and then have them come back and say, listen, this is a citizen of the United States, even though I have no jurisdiction in the United States myself? How could your child have jurisdiction in a nation of which you are not legally a part of? Does anyone want to try to answer that one for me? Where does it say that in the 14th Amendment? It doesn't say that, because it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, who would vote for that? Now, under the court's current interpretation, he warned that citizenship is being decoupled from allegiance and longevity, turning into an administrative status to be seized by interlopers. He's absolutely right about this. Now, I don't think he's going to be successful if he tries to pass any amendment to the Constitution. I don't believe it. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the numbers to even pass the SAVE Act right now. How the hell are we going to get something like this passed, which, again, ensures that illegal aliens who have children or an illegal alien that has a child in the United States does not have a U.S. citizen child, that their child is of the jurisdictions of which they came from? How are you going to get the Democrats in Congress on board with that, especially in a midterm cycle that's as tumultuous as it is right now? How are we going to get this passed? You're not. It's simply just not going to work. So again, I applaud him that he understands that there's a problem here, but you're not going to get Democrats on board for this. And unless we change the way elections are run in this country, again, with the SAVE Act, which again ensures there's some sort of honesty and integrity over our elections, you're not going to have any real semblance of that. So my position is we need to get rid of, again, all the electronic voting machines. I think we need to obviously pass the SAVE Act. You have to have a proper ID. But how do you do that when you have states like my previous state, California? They give away 1 million IDs in 1 year to illegal aliens. How are you able to determine who's supposed to be here and who's not supposed to be here? So I think the shift of our focus now has to change. Yes, I think we should, again, try this yet again. I believe we need to go before the courts yet again and try to figure this out to get them to realize this is a grave error that's been made right now. This simply is not going to work. This is a way to take down the country. But Schmitt is right. He needs to, again, we need to permanently redefine birthright citizenship and align it with what he describes as, again, the original post, he calls it Civil War. I call it Lincoln's War because I'm just that person. But that's what he's referring to, the Civil War intent, of course. And again, birthright citizenship only to those not subject to any foreign power. Therefore, any illegal alien could not have a child as a U.S. citizen. That's what it means in plain text, folks. There's no other way to say it to you. So if the Democrats are going to play this game, then what's our next move here? What's our next move on the chessboard? Because we got to do something. We can't just sit there and go, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That's okay. You can make it across the border illegally and be, not caught and have a child, then hey, there, you're good. You're good to go. And by the way, you can bring your entire family from where the hell you came from, too, next. That's another problem with the unchecked immigration of this nation right now. But we, too, can play that game. And the way they figure this out, when you look at what President Trump can do next as a result of this, you can look at various different U.S. codes, for instance, that are very important, by the way. Here's one that I want you to look at. This comes from PJ Media. It says, under U.S. code, the president has broad authority over who may enter the country. This is important right now. Specifically in 8 U.S.C. 1182 F, it says, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interest of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, in other words, illegal aliens, or impose on the entry of aliens any restriction he may deem to be appropriate. Now, I've been saying this for quite some time right now. Until we get the several millions of illegal aliens out of this country, I say we have a moratorium on immigration in general. So in other words, if you have tens of millions of illegals in this country, why would you bring in another legal million immigrants rather, to become citizens later on? Why would you do that? And again, why would you bring in people when you have an unemployment rate in this country? It doesn't make any sense either. But let's stick to the main focus here. Can the president now say, if you're from China, if you're from India, if you're from, let's throw countries, Venezuela, just list all these countries where you're getting people coming into this country. Let's say you bar them from the nation all over and say, listen, you're not coming into the country right now. You're not going to be coming in the country if you're from Mexico, or if you're from Guatemala, or again, you could list all the countries. Again, Mexico would be the most important one because they share a southern border with us. I would go with Canada too. Why not? We have people coming in from the north as well. Bar it. You cannot come into the country if you're stepping in the country from Canada. You must come through a port of entry by the United States. And that's the way it should be done. So there's, again, many different ways he can play this. I hope he decides to play something like this because this is the legal grounds on which he can do this. And again, we know that during Trump's first term through Executive Order 13780 and Proclamation 9645, he took action to ban people from various different countries. He calls them terrorist-sponsoring nations, for instance, Iran, Yemen, Libya, Somalia, Venezuela, among others. And leftists complained. Remember that leftists were complaining? They said that it was a Muslim ban. But again, he was able to do so. The Supreme Court affirmed that the president has the right to control harmful foreign travel into the United States. So let's do all away with it. But let's also curb the immigration as well. Let's say, hey, we're putting on a moratorium right now on immigration. We're not allowing any new immigrants to come into this country at the moment. We're not going to do it. That would also send a message. But we've got to get this birth tourism under control, folks. We've got to stop this. No nation can survive this. And I think that's the point why they ruled in favor of this yesterday. Of course, the two so-called conservatives, Justices Barrett and Roberts, and of course the three leftist ladies on the bench, wanted to do this because, again, it benefits them. It benefits their agenda. This is exactly what they want. And by the way, he could also, this is what Trump could do as well. And we saw this in 2020, by the way. The administration created rules that consular officers must deny B1, B2 tourist visas to pregnant applicants if they believe the woman's primary purpose in traveling to the U.S. is to birth an American baby, which again would be a baby of the country of which she comes from. Let's call it for what it is. And by the way, a broader executive order could expand this by declaring pregnant non-citizens or those reasonably believed to be pregnant as a class whose entry is detrimental, potentially covering visa issuance, admission at any ports of entry, and exceptions, again, for diplomats or in humanitarian cases and lawful permanent residencies. This is the way you go about doing it then. You're going to play like this? We'll play this way too then. We've got things we can use legally to do this. This is all very, very important. This is about the future of the country. We're celebrating 250 years as a nation right now. And on this week, the Supreme Court failed the United States citizens and sided with illegal aliens to allow the floodgates to be opened up to, I guess, the entire world, folks. 8 billion people. Anybody can come over and have children. And they're all of a sudden U.S. citizens. It's not going to fly. It's not going to work, and it shouldn't work. And as a result of that, I think Trump needs to take precise action. Number one, a moratorium for the remainder of his presidency on immigration. It is done. We are not allowing any new immigrants into this country. And should a J.D. Vance, should a Ron DeSantis, should a Marco Rubio win in 2028, they must follow suit with that as well. They must. They have to do this. This is the way you save a nation from the ridiculous Democrats. By the way, build the border wall. We print money for every other damn thing. Print out money, build the damn border wall, put troops on the border, and arrest anybody that comes over. That's the way that works. No one is coming in and getting a free ride anymore. And by the way, I would do that as well if I was in Congress. If you are an immigrant to this country, you aren't allowed any of the provisions of the nation. What do I mean by that? It means you can't have, for instance, access to food stamps, welfare, free housing, free medical, none of that. None of that. It's going back to the way it was back in the early 20th century. You're coming here to work. You're not coming here to sit on your ass and collect a check, okay? I hate to be vulgar, but that's exactly the way it needs to go to, okay? We're not going back to this. We're not going back to the ways in which we're providing for everybody to just come in here and leech off the system. That's not going to work. And it hasn't worked. And it hasn't created a better America as well. This is how you make America great again, folks. And on that note, let me just move over to another development in today's news articles. This one's, again, just showing how the left is moving further to the left, of course. We've got progressive Democrats now scoring some victories in these primary elections on Tuesday. And we're highlighting and now looking over at Colorado. What happened in Colorado? Well, we had a 29-year-old nitwit who calls herself a democratic socialist, which really is just a communist. And her name is Milat Kiros. And she defeated a 15-term Congresswoman, Diana DeGette, I believe is how you say her name. And it goes to show you that the Democratic Party is moving further to the left and is becoming much more communistic as the day passes. We just saw what Mum Nummy did with his endorsements in the Big Orange. We're also looking in the state's lone swing district, and one of the party's top pickup targets, the progressive state representative Manny Rutinel, beats a moderate former state representative Shannon Burt. So we're seeing in Colorado is what takes place in California or in New York City. Again, it's the bluing of Colorado. Everyone that left California for Colorado, this is who they're voting for now. And by the way, before you say anything, who is this woman, by the way? This is the thing you have to ask yourself. Who is Milat Kiros? What is this? Who is this woman? Well, she's from Ethiopia. Okay, she came here when she was an infant with her parents. It doesn't say if it's legal or illegal, but again, it says her parents immigrated when she was an infant to the United States. Okay, fine, here we go. So she goes and becomes a lawyer. Great, okay, she becomes a lawyer. And what does she do in her first job? Well, she gets fired in 2023. Gets fired because she blasts her, her law firm and what she worked for. They end up firing her. Then she goes and she tries to enroll into a PhD program. Doesn't say if she graduated or not, but she goes back in academia. And now she's running for Congress, of which it looks like she has a pretty good chance of probably winning in this seat. But what does this woman stand for? That's the thing you have to ask yourself. Now, she's, again, a declared Democrat Socialist of America. What do they stand for? Everything the other nitwits I mentioned to you last week stand for. Again, endorsed by Bernie Sanders. That's the first red flag. But what does she want? She wants things such as, again, the health care for all, again, the freezing of rent, the rising of the minimum wage in the country. She wants to go from $15 to $22. I mean, again, all the things Bernie Sanders says, this woman just repeats. That's the way it works. That's the way it works now. Repeat everything Bernie Sanders says, right? Millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, we got to tax them. Tax the top 10, 1% of their wealth. We must take their wealth. We must use it to bring down our national debt. No, he doesn't say that, does he? He talks about bringing it and giving it to X, Y, and Z. Again, that's the pitch all communists make, except the money never gets these people. If it did, we'd have a booming economy right now, wouldn't we? Now, this woman already claims that we're in a socialist country right now. That's what she claims, at least. And while we do have programs in which we use taxes to, build roads, bridges, have public education, and what have you, that's not the way the country is set up, though. That's the problem with these types of people. And never forget, when they call themselves democratic socialists, they're really simply communists. And I want to read this to you, too. This is important. I want to share this with you. What did Karl Marx say about socialism? Well, he said it was a bridge between capitalism and communism. That's what it comes down to. And socialism is really just this stage which follows capitalism, and it precedes the ultimate goal, which is communism. This is what Lenin said as well. Socialism is just another way of saying communism. That's exactly what it is. It's just a step to get there before you can take over completely everything from the people of which you are governing. But what were the core features of what Marx's view? This is what they actually believe in. And when you hear them talk, these so-called democratic socialists, right, the Bernie Sandersites of the world, this is exactly what they sound like, right? The abolition of class distinction. So in other words, there is no lower class, working class, middle class, upper middle class, wealthy class, right, ruling class, elite group, right? There's none of that. Everyone is at the bottom, in garbage. That's the way every communist government is run. Everyone in the government runs and owns everything. They own the means of production, and everyone else gets whatever they can hopefully get. So that brings me to the next point here. Common ownership. That means the means of production, the factories, the land, the resources, are all collectively owned. There is no private ownership. So you have Mum Dummy's version of city housing, right? There's no private housing anymore. It's now government owned. It's all city owned, right? You own nothing, right? Is that what Klaus Schwab said at the World Health Forum, rather? World Economic Forum, excuse me. I was thinking of the World Health Organization for some reason. What did he say? You will own nothing and love it, right? You owns nothing and you will love it, right? That's what he said, right? That's in his German voice. And the Great Reset and all those other things, this is what they're talking about. This is what they want. Now, what else did Marx say, though? Production for use value. So in other words, goods and services are produced to meet human needs directly, not to generate a profit. So in other words, if you grow crops, right? If you're let's say you're a potato farmer, you're only producing potatoes just to feed people. You're not trying to make a profit. And why would you? Everything's socialist anyway. You're only going to get what the government gives you. But your job is to produce those potatoes and still give them up to the people that want to eat them. You're not going to get any money from it, though. And this is why communism tends to fail, of course. Because what's the incentive for you to go out and break your back and do this every day if you're not going to make any money from it? There is no incentive. You know, I'd rather be the person just, sweeping the floors in an air-conditioned supermarket, if that's the case, right? Do the least amount of things to get, I guess, everything, right? That's the way they sell this paradise of communism. But it never works out because, again, people are not going to do that. No one's going to go work, to produce as many potatoes as possible, or to slaughter however many heads of cattle, or to sell as many bushels of corn or lettuce or whatever it may be to feed people for no profit. It's just not going to work out. Simply isn't going to work out. And that's why communism ultimately fails. That's another problem with it, of course. Then, of course, the state is running everything anyways, which we've seen how that works in the United States. Economic planning. So that means the production and the distribution are coordinated through central planning. That means coming from one place, and that, of course, is the head of state. So in other words, they don't believe in autonomy. They don't believe that you can govern yourself. They don't believe in classic liberalism, which is, again, small government, which is, again, is what the founders gave us. They believe everything needs to be from the top, and it goes all the way down to the bottom, which is where all the people are that are not in the government. And finally, the distribution based on needs. So what did Marx envision? Well, he envisioned to each according to his needs. Interesting. So this is like a Soviet-style socialism, I guess. Again, according to his contribution. Well, again, what if, for instance, you're that person that sweeps the floor? That's your job. You got to make sure the floor is swept. So does that mean you are allowed the needs of anything you want? You can drive a Ferrari. You can have the highest quality burgers and steaks and what have you, the biggest house on the block. How do you divide that up at that point? How does that make any sense? But this is where they're pushing you. Government ownership of all the housing, that's what they want. Government healthcare system program, that's what they want as well. They control everything. Everyone pays into one certain program that the government oversees. And everyone has universal basic income based on that. But we've even heard people like Elon Musk talk about this. Mark Zuckerberg has talked about this as well. So I guess the government, dishes out a certain check to you every month, and then you use that check to maybe buy things that you like if you have the money for it? What about your own private property? Do you have private? No, you don't have private property. You own nothing, and you'll love it, folks. Don't you know that? You will own nothing. You won't own your own automobile. Everything will be transportation-based in that city. Think 15-minute cities too, folks. We see that happening inside the United States right now. We see it happening in places like Europe. Look no further than Oxford. Yeah, I've been telling you about this for a while now. This is what this woman believes in. And these people are getting more and more power as time goes on, especially in this 2026 midterm election cycle. So the Democratic Party is moving more to the left. What are the Republicans going to do? What are they going to do? Seriously, what are the Republicans going to do to counter this, to sell to the American people this ideology is bad? Our ideology is going to work. Because we've got to produce results, folks. If we produce no results, there's no need to vote for Republicans. And doesn't that sound good, though? It does sound nice, though, doesn't it? When you say, for instance, well, everyone's going to have access to everything. Everyone's going to have access to health. The best health care in the world, right? Bernie Sanders. You have to ask yourself the question. Does everyone get the best doctor then? Does that mean everyone gets the best car, the best housing? Of course not. Everything crumbles in this system. It has never worked. It's never worked all throughout history, and it will never work right now if we try to implement this again. But it sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds good to the Gen Zers. This woman is 27 years old, this Kyros, or whatever the hell her name is. Sounds good, doesn't it? Everyone's going to have, there's no class A, no classes, folks. There's no borders either. Anyone can come into the country. Everyone can be a citizen. Which is, again, amazing to me. I thought we were told that, these people that come into another country are, colonizers, they're illegal invaders, yet they're granted citizenship right away. That makes sense, doesn't it? But, when we did it as white Europeans, that was wrong. When anyone else does it, it's absolutely fine. And it's constitutional, apparently. So I digress, folks. We have so many dangerous things ahead of us. Again, this birthright citizenship, the takeover of the Democratic Party to become the actual Communist Party of the United States. Again, they're gaining ground slowly but surely. And when you have, again, no voter ID laws in a lot of these states, and you keep pushing people, and you keep pushing these types of people in, and we can't determine if they've actually been elected or not, we didn't even know that. This woman could not have even been duly elected, but the powers that be could turn the tables for them. That's the problem. So we need the SAVE Act now more than ever. I'll just say it to you that way. There's another way I could say it to you. Let's move on to another very important topic, ladies and gentlemen, and let's talk about the economy for a second. Yes. We've got to talk about all things economics on Friday, of course, but let me go over what Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair, is talking about now. And he said on Wednesday that he will stick firmly to the United States Central Bank's 2% inflation target and disappoint anyone who expects to lose monetary policy despite President Trump's calls for interest rate cuts. Now, this is important because, again, I don't think he can cut rates just yet. He hasn't risen rates yet either. He's going to have to do something soon, though. And I think he understands he's got to bring the inflation down. He's got to bring it down to below 2% before he can even talk about cutting rates. That's my take on it. I think inflation is going to get much, much worse. But again, he's standing firm that, again, he's going to wait. At least that's the indication I believe he's signaling to us, that he's going to have to raise rates before he cuts them. So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, if we're sitting at the 4.2% inflation rate, which we find ourselves in right now, that means the interest rates have got to go up. Because right now we're sitting at, I think, about 3 and change percent-wise basis points for interest rates. So when you borrow money, when you're paying back loans, this is the rate you're paying. And he's going to have to raise them because, again, when you have 4.2% inflation, that means you have to have 5.2% interest rates to match that. That's how you try to bring down the inflation in the country. You make it harder and harder to get loans. At least that's their perception about all this. So Warsh is going to probably get a little bit unpopular at the beginning of this. It's going to be very difficult for him to manage this, but he's got to create a monetary policy that's bringing things down. And he's got to work with President Trump to also do this as well. And so I say that to you because I hope what his goal is, obviously, is, again, working with all the central banks of the world, he's going to have to scale things back. He's going to have to raise rates very soon to bring down the inflation, of which we're going to be upon very, very soon. Again, I think inflation is going to get much, much worse, especially when the oil crash happens in the next couple of weeks. We have to determine if we're going to make diesel fuel for tractor trailers or if we're going to have jet fuel. Which one are we going to have? I mean, this is the position we're in right now. And when that, again, offshoots to everything else, again, if we can't get goods and services to where they need to go, that's a big problem. If you can't get gas for your vehicle, how are you going to get to work? So we're in this quagmire, folks, because, again, of what's taking place inside of Iran, which I've been telling you for quite some time. Again, I know Warsh can't sit down and tell the president what to do in terms of military policy, but he's got to illustrate that what's taking place in the Persian Gulf is destroying everything we've gained inside our own economy. And by the way, we had gas prices going down for much of Trump's new tenure, but the prices have now escalated because of what's going on inside of the Persian Gulf. And by the way, it's affecting the AI in this country. It's affecting the crop growth in this country and the production of that. So Trump has got to say to himself at some point, we've got to stop this. We've got to stop this policy. So the question is, how soon can we get out of the Iran war? How soon can we stop what's going on there? And if we're not asking ourselves that question, then this prolongs, and that means inflation prolongs, that means interest rates go up, that means, of course, the bond market goes up, and that means the economy crashes. So big problems ahead if we simply don't get out of this war. And by the way, I don't think we're going to be getting out of this war anytime soon officially, ladies and gentlemen, although we may see the ceasing of the firing against each other, which may or may not happen. We've already seen the memorandum of understanding just go up in flames already. But the big question is, does Trump just get out? Does he get out? And by the way, what does Vance say about this? Let's move on. This comes out of ZeroHedge. Now, he's talking in terms about what's going on with the talks with Iran and Doha, which apparently we have sent nobody to talk to them. Certainly nobody's serious. Witkoff and Kushner are not serious people. So anytime you hear Witkoff and Kushner, think, Dumb and Dumber. That's what I want you to think about. Now, are they really that dumb? Probably not, but they're not negotiators. They're simply not. They're real estate investors. That's what they come down to. And so the American side is trying to keep up this illusion of the progress on these Iran talks, even though Tehran has once again confirmed that there is no direct meeting taking place in Doha. That means there is no discussion. There's no moving forward. And that means, again, the memorandum of understanding is just as it is. It's just words on a piece of paper. The Iranians will do what they want to do, and I guess Trump will do whatever he sees he wants to do. Now, I've said to you before, I think the shooting is more political theater than anything, but we're not stopping the war. There is no peace, folks. There is no understanding. The understanding is that the Iranians have won the conflict. That's what the result of that is. Had we won the war with them, it'd be on our terms. But it's not on our terms. And that's the bigger part of the problem. Listen to J.D. Vance, though. This is what he was telling Laura Ingraham just yesterday evening on the progress of these talks with Iran. Take a listen.
I actually think that the United States is in a great position, however the negotiation ultimately shakes out. If the negotiation is successful, you have an Iran that is permanently transformed, that's not funding regional terrorism and instability, that has permanently given up on any nuclear weapons ambition, and that as a result is welcomed back into the world economy. That's a great outcome for the American people. It's a great outcome for the whole region. But if, on the other hand, the Iranians don't behave, if they don't make the concessions in the negotiations that we need to see, their nuclear program is still destroyed, their conventional military is still destroyed, and the United States is still in a much stronger position relative to the Iranians.
The problem is, I think J.D. Vance understands this, there is no peace if, for instance, the Israelis are still in Lebanon, which they've claimed time and time again they will not leave. So again, when you have provision number one, that the fighting stops on all fronts, and yet you still have Lebanon being invaded by the IDF, you don't have a ceasefire. You don't have an end to this conflict. So really, it's Israel that will determine, will this end? And As of right now, you're hearing from Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, even Netanyahu himself, saying, listen, we're going to stay in this area where we'll create a buffer zone to fight these terrorists. Okay. Even though you shot on them first, you invaded their country first. See, folks, the problem that most people don't understand is that the Israelis were in what's called this area known as I believe it's called the Sheba Farms. It's in kind of northeast Lebanon. And they were in this territory, and they're not supposed to be in this area. And they were fired upon by Hezbollah. And they said, well, look, we're being fired upon. But you're not supposed to be in that region. You are an illegal occupier of that territory that does not belong to you. Again, it violates UN Charter, Article 242. Not supposed to be in their territory. You must respect the territory of other nations. That's what it says. So why are you in this area? Why are you trying to displace 1.5 million Lebanese from south of the Litani River? Really, it's because they want that water supply. And, of course, they want that land. But it has nothing to do with creating a buffer zone. It really has nothing to do with Hezbollah either. They just want the land. And Netanyahu needs the calamity, of course, to keep himself out of jail. That's another thing. He's facing corruption charges. He's facing prison time. And he's trying to stay relevant so he can remain as prime minister. Therefore, he stops that from happening. He and his wife go into jail. So when we look at the reality of what's going on, it's not Hezbollah just simply firing into Israel. It's Hezbollah fending off the IDF in areas in which they do not belong. That's what it comes down to. And so, folks, again, J.D. Vance can call them, a terrorist organization. They're a political party within Lebanon. And they are, again, fighting for where their home is. Southern Lebanon is where those in Hezbollah live. This is where they reside. They are a resistance militia. And who are they resisting? They're resisting the illegal Israeli occupation. They're not just simply invading inside northern Israel. It's not what's going on here. So I would like J.D. Vance to at least acknowledge that. But again, I doubt that ever will happen. And, we have, I don't even know if we're even having the talks of the nuclear ambition anymore. I rarely hear Trump say anything, but I hear him say, they don't have a nuclear weapon, which they didn't have at the start of this war anyways. But will the Iranians simply just leave the table completely? Will they simply go forth with, again, the tolls in the Persian Gulf through their Strait Authority? Will they go through with that? Will they control the Strait moving forward? I seem to think so. Some people continue to say they're not going to do that. I think they will do that. And why do I say that? Because, again, right now they have military control over the Strait of Hormuz. Oman is on board, despite what you've heard from people like Waltz. The Iranians will control that. The Omanis will benefit from it as well. But I really want to see something happen with this, at least memorandum of understanding. At least get a negotiation going where we come to terms with what's going on here. But Trump cannot rein in Israel. That's the biggest problem. So I don't see peace happening anytime soon. The only way peace happens is if Israel leaves Lebanon. Until you see that, you have nothing. You have nothing because Israel's not honoring their portion of it. If Israel would recognize that, yes, we need to leave southern Lebanon in order to have this peace negotiation and peace between Lebanon and Israel, and of course Iran and Israel and the United States and Israel and Iran, then you don't have anything. You have nothing. And that's really what I see here. We have words on a paper that are not being abided by. And the reason I say this to you, and this is very important too, by the way. This is from the Associated Press. It says here, a ship ran aground in the Strait of Hormuz while using a route not approved by Iran. So I have to laugh. This could also be another reason why the Iranians have said, listen to what we're telling you. You have to, again, coordinate with us. Right? You go on through it's a website or they made some document of which you fax to the IRGC saying, listen, this is the Persian Gulf Strait Authority run by the Iranians. You will coordinate with us, and we will get you through the strait to transit it safely, and you'll be on your way. We're not charging any fees right now for the first 60 days of which this document was signed, this memorandum of understanding, and you'll be on your way. But the UK, the United States have seemed to let other ships believe that they could allow them a safe transit on their own means, which again is not going to work. We saw what happened to the Ever Lovely. It was hit with a drone. We saw 2 other vessels that were hit with drones, a little bit harder, and those ships even turned around. But now we have another ship now that was, again, a vessel was identified as a foreign container ship with no other details about who owned the ship, under which flag it sails. But the report appeared aimed at underlining Tehran's claims to control the strait, which the world has long considered an international waterway. Again, they are controlling it because we know that they will unleash the drones on the ships if they try to do so. That's what took place just last week. But since the United States and Israel launched this war against Iran on February the 28th, Iran has used its ability to choke off this waterway, which, again, we all know about. They're doing it right now. And, again, disrupting the global markets. I disagree with this, though. It's not Iran that did it. Iran said that they would do that if we invaded them. If Israel and the United States attacked, this is what they would do. And by the way, Trump was even baffled by the concept that it was taking place. Anyway, wow, we never realized they would do that. Well, yeah, they said that. By the way, you listen to any of my shows in February, I said, if this happens, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed by the Iranians, and we will have a supply chain shortage of oil, liquefied natural gas, the fertilizer supplies of which we need, the raw materials for that, the urea, the sulfur, helium, aluminum. Again, there's lots of crucial elements that come out of the Persian Gulf that the entire world uses. So we can't simply just allow this to happen. And by the way, when this war took place on February the 20th, I saw all the talking heads. Oh, it's so brilliant, right? It's such a brilliant invasion. We took out that damn Ayatollah. Now we'll get that regime change. We'll have a safer Iran. Nothing's going to happen in the Strait. And what happened? Now we're dealing with 4.2% inflation. We have a heavy crude problem. We don't have the heavy crude coming in the United States. We don't have the resources to plant crops inside the United States because 35% of the urea, the sulfur, are not coming in to create the necessary fertilizer. So farmers have an option. They could pay more, or they could simply go out of business. That's their option right now. And by the way, what we don't plant in the United States today, we're not going to have in the next 6 months. Just thought I'd share that with you too, because no one else is telling it to you. Fairly few at all, I have to say. And so, folks, it's not the Iranians because, again, the Iranians did not start this war. It was the United States. They did not listen to the Iranians. That during negotiations committed perfidy, which, again, is illegal under international law. You cannot have in good faith negotiations and then decide to have this sneak attack and take out a world leader. Just doesn't work out that way. Again, that's illegal, and there's reasons for that. So if the United States wants the strait to be open, they have a way to do it. They could stop the war. They could pull the troops out of the region. And we could actually negotiate with the Iranians, like J.D. Vance said, and open up the world trade to them and stop this nonsense with these sanctions on them. And come to the terms now that, yes, moving forward, they will control what comes out of the Strait of Hormuz, and they will have a fee system in place to do so. And we will not stop them from doing that. Because if we could have, we would have. And we didn't, so that shows us we can't do that. We would have done it already. So we can admit defeat. We could say, listen, we've won. Either way, it doesn't matter. Get out of the region. Pull out of the region. It looks like Trump is starting to do that. But again, he needs to really get this going. Because this is not good. This is going to get very, very bad in the next couple of weeks, folks. Because we don't have any heavy crude coming in the United States. At least the amount that we need in order to function as a working society. And then there'll be problems with that completely. All right, let's move on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on to another article that coexists with the topic we're discussing right now in Iran. This comes from the New York Post. And it says, one airman went missing after an MH-60S Sea Hawk helicopter crashes in the Arabian Sea, where fleet is operating for the Iran war. And we don't have too many details about this, other than the Navy airman is missing right now. It says here that the Sea Hawk was assigned with the USS George H.W. Bush aircraft carrier and was forced to conduct an emergency landing around 3:30 a.m. Now, we don't know exactly why the emergency landing was set to take place. We don't know if it was a mechanical issue, if it was shot down. We haven't been given the details about that, but there's no indication that it was caused by a hostile action. So I'm guessing it's probably a mechanical error, at least that's what they're telling us right now. Three of the helicopter's 4 crew members have been recovered and are in stable condition aboard the George H.W. Bush, the 5th Fleet added as to what's going on here. So let's pray, ladies and gentlemen, that we find this airman and that he's okay. But folks, we need to stop this. Let's get out of the region. Let's move out. Stop it already. We're not going to win, certainly not win militarily, and we've got to get our economy pumping back up. That's my take on it. I know some people don't like that, but this is the way we need to move forward. Because nothing benefits us from being in the region. It just prolongs what's taking place in the Persian Gulf. And of course with world trade, which again is not helping out the Europeans as well. And on that note, let me just move our shift a little bit north to our friends in the Russian Federation. This story right now has been unfolding. Now, it's not in any major publications, unfortunately, but this is what's taking place between Russia and Ukraine. And the Russians now say that over 400 Ukrainian drones have been shot down, and sadly, a baby was killed outside of Moscow in this drone attack by Ukraine. And it says here that Kiev has now stepped up its long-range drone strike campaign against Russia in recent months, as Moscow's full-scale offensive against Ukraine drags on for almost 4.5 years now. And it says that Kiev now has particularly targeted Russian energy infrastructure to hit a vital source of the Kremlin's revenue to fund its war effort. That's not going to go over so well for the Ukrainians, I would have to say. Over 2 million dead. Again, you can't even get the Ukrainians to operate these drones now because they know it's just suicide when they do these types of things. But it says here that the air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 419 Ukrainian fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles. Around the country, the Defense Ministry posted this on the state-run Max platform. The governor of the region of Moscow later said that the drones had struck the village just southwest of Moscow, hitting a private house. And unfortunately, a 6-month-old baby has died on its way to the hospital. This is no good, folks. This war should have been over 4.5 years ago as well. Joe Biden, Boris Johnson decided to let the war continue on. And then, of course, NATO decided to come in and be the benefactor for Ukraine, which, again, is having no benefit to the Ukrainians. It's depleting the country. Certainly, it's depleting the country of its male population. And, again, this war of attrition by Putin is continuing on. I do believe this offensive right now will likely uptick in the summer months. I don't know really what more Putin can do. I think what he has to do, this is my own position on this, I think he's got to go and he's got to take Kiev. I think he's got to, that doesn't mean he has to bomb Kiev, but I think he needs to have control over Kiev, control everything that's taking place. And I think you would see Zelensky, maybe, hopefully, surrender. Again, Zelensky he has no future in Ukraine. I'll just say that to you. He has no future in Ukraine. The oligarchs that run him understand this. There is no position of winning. And while the Russians are taking some losses, they pale in comparison to the losses that the Ukrainians have taken. Over 2 million men, Ukrainian men, have been killed in this ridiculous war. And it has to do with what's going on in the country, though. When you have the Azov Battalion, when you have the Ukrainians that are shelling the Russian-speaking population in the Donbass, and Putin says, no more, we're going in to rescue these people. And by the way, yes, we now will take this land. And then you have the twerp Zelensky, the coke freak, the failed comedian himself saying, no, we're going to continue to fight off the Russians. It's just not going to work. But we're seeing this uptick of this drone activity now. Again, I think this is a last-ditch effort by the Ukrainians to see if they can hit something that sticks. They already tried to assassinate Putin. We know this took place. They failed in their attempt to do so. It's not going to work. Russia is too strong, and Ukraine is too weak at this point. And again, it's a country that is dying, folks. And it's a very sad thing to see this taking place, too. I know when I was in LA, I taught many Ukrainian students, by the way, that came from the war-torn country, and many of them are wonderful people. And it's just sad to see that this is taking place right now. And it's not ending. But I think soon enough this will have to end, because I think most people want this to end too in Russia. I don't think they want this to continue on. Let's end it once and for all. All right, let's move on. Fox News has a great article about the Southern Poverty Law Center's money scheme that's going on now. This fraudulent, I guess you'd say this money laundering that's been taking place to fund these pay-to-hate operations, of which they are greatly a part of. Get a load of this. A pair of former top executives at the Southern Poverty Law Center used a network of checking accounts to secretly funnel some $4.1 million of usually money that's been given to them through NGOs and what have you, or people themselves. I think George Clooney probably wants his money back, don't you, folks? I'd say so. But anyway, the $4.1 million to extremists, including nicknamed the Aryan Barbarian. That's a hell of a name, isn't it, for somebody? Can you imagine associating with somebody that calls themselves the Aryan Barbarian? Anyway, this is all part of this long-running pay-to-hate scheme that the feds have now discussed and have openly shared with Fox News Digital. The SPLC's former chief financial officer, Teenie Hutchison, and ex-intelligence project chief Heidi Beirich, I believe that's how you say her name, allegedly created the accounts at a bank in 2008, making the beleaguered nonprofit's trusted bank a hub for diverting supporters' donations to sketchy group sources. Have said to us. This is so ridiculous. This is so dumb. We hear nonstop from these different groups, these organizations, again, the ignoramuses on the left, particularly in the mainstream media, telling us how racism is alive and well, and yet you have to have the Southern Poverty Law Center, whose mission is to fight this, to actually give money to get these people to do these things in the name of hate and racism. Amazing. And some 13 field sources have so far been identified in the court filings. The SPLC now found its niche, and its leaders built a fiefdom with donations they got like crazy. I have to laugh, folks. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Again, this is all about anti-white. This is what it's all about. We saw this with the Charlottesville protests. They had to have this, again, foment out of control, where a young woman was ran over. So awful. So awful. These people need to be arrested. They need to be taken down. This can't stand. These NGOs getting our taxpayer dollars, this can't stand anymore. And the type of fraud we see with a lot of these groups, many we see out of Minnesota, California, claiming to be for the people, creating what they call, what was it in, I think it was autism was the one in Minnesota. And in California, you have things like the hospice program, the fraud that's taking place there, getting these big contracts, getting this money, learning centers, again, raking in the dough, and then they're not providing any of these services. And again, there's zero oversight all across the country. Minnesota and California, just two of the examples. This is rampant all over the country, folks. And it's a complete waste of money. Let's stop with this. Let's get these people indicted that are doing this, especially from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And by the way, while we're at it, can we get rid of the ADL? I'm sick of this Jonathan Greenblatt going on and talking about how Christians are anti-Semitic if they use Bible verses, which he's trying to prevent people in America, the land of the free, where we have freedom of speech, from doing so. I've had enough of this. I've really had enough of hearing about these jackasses telling us about racism and the white men are the number one, group of terrorists in the country. I mean, get the hell out of here. I've had enough of these people. I've had enough. You've had enough. So let's be done with it. There's no reason to have these people here anymore. It's over. Shut down these stupid organizations. They're completely ridiculous in and of themselves. And all they do is foment hate, folks. That's all they do. They are left-wing organizations to try to take down America, particularly the white, straight male population in this country. This is who they target. Especially Christians, by the way. They can't stand them either. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for you today on today's show. Thank you for being here as always. I appreciate you so much. Make sure you're staying prepped with food, water, medicine, and fuel, money, tools, anything to be self-sufficient. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.